Howdy, folks. Welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and we got another good one for you today. Today, we're actually connecting with Curtis Walker out of Utah. Curtis is a listener who reached out and said, man, I got some stories you got to hear, and he didn't disappoint. He did bring a lot of porcupine to the conversation, which was unexpected and appreciated. So, Curtis, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, man. We really do appreciate it. To you listeners, thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you follow Curtis. He doesn't have too much going on, I think, on Facebook. But also go out there and follow us on whatever you're listening to right now, whether it's Spotify or Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts. And give us a 5-star review if you can. I'm going to stop right there, guys, and let this thing just go ahead and get itself going. But thank you again for tuning in. Now let's let Curtis tell you his stories. All right, Curtis. Welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast, brother. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. How you doing?
I am doing well, man. I was a little nervous here, Curtis. I thought our audio issues were going to get the best of us, but we pulled it through, and I'm super excited to hear your stories today, man.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. And yeah, I'm in the middle of Nowheresville, so having any kind of service right now is amazing. So I'm just going to run with it.
Well, I'm glad that you took the time out of your evening to chat with us. Also, to reach out once again, everyone listening, Curtis is one of those people that heard the podcast and was like, "Oh man, I got some stories I got to share," and he reached out to me, which is highly encouraged and are, of course, some of my favorite stories that I've heard so far. So thank you for that, Curtis, man. Really do appreciate it. But let's kick this thing off right and let you introduce yourself so the people know who they're hearing some stories from today.
Absolutely. So my name is Curtis Walker. I grew up in a little town called Butternut, Wisconsin, way on the northern part. I'm just about Canadian. I'm so northern. I grew up in a 300-person town. Closest Walmart was about an hour and a half, 2 hours away. So really, the only things we could do was hunting, fishing, maybe a little bit of sunbathing if you get 1 month of summer a year. I traveled around a little bit as a young man, like most young men do, trying to find their niche in the world. I used to work for 3M. I did the N95 masks. I made the very first couple N95 masks for the COVID pandemic.
Oh, no way. Business has been good then for a little while.
It was for a little while, but once it started slowing down, my job kind of became not so essential anymore.
Gotcha.
So I kind of thought, that's all right. It really helps the growing because I'm still young. I thought, man, you know what? I've always dreamed about being a hunting guide. Why don't I just take a shot at it? So I packed all my stuff up that I could put in a truck, and I went all the way down to Colburn, Colorado, on the outside of Grand Junction.
Okay. What's the name of that town again?
Colburn, Colorado.
Colburn. Never been. I'm born and raised in Colorado, and I've never even heard of that town. So cool.
You ever, where Grand or Battlement Mesas are?
Yep.
So it's actually right in the middle of both Battlement and Grand Mesa. You could see Powderhorn from where I was at.
Okay, very cool, man. And so how did you pick that spot? Is that where the guide was that you ended up connecting with, or was you're like, I'm going there, and then I'm gonna figure it out?
So the guy that I connected with actually used to be a 3M'er himself. He used to work in 3M. And when I contacted him, I just said, man, I don't feel fulfilled. I feel like that I'm leaving a lot of things on the table. I want to try this before I get too old. I settle down. I really want to do this for me. He said, why don't you come out? We'll give you a shot. I went through his guide school. And then as this guide school ended, I asked him if I could stay, maybe be a ranch hand, and then try to guide for him in the fall. He said that he'll give me a shot. He'd like to see what I have. There's a couple times where he kind of said, I'm a heavier guy. You're too heavy for this kind of work. And I told him, man, hold my beer and watch this. So I almost lasted the whole entire season with him. Unfortunately, due to personal problems between us, mostly financial, I told him I can't do this anymore. But man, that was some of the best times and rough times of my life. I tell people that was kind of like my military deployment because it broke me and rebuilt me at the same time.
That's cool. Had you ever done much Western big game hunting before you ran out and became a Western big game guide?
Nope, I just got thrown into the fire just like that.
Awesome, man. Good for you. Way to take that leap.
Yeah, it definitely was a leap. It kind of felt like a fish out of water for a little while. I went from working in a factory to riding a big old burly mule for a while. I learned real quick the do's and don'ts. And actually, you know what? That could probably lead into a good story with you guys.
Well, let's go, man. Let's start this thing off right. Set the stage
Sounds
for
good.
us, man.
So, my first story, I wasn't even going to talk about this, but that kind of rattled my brain. One of our very first hunting camps that came in were actually 9 Wisconsin boys. So of course, I felt at home right away.
Yeah.
We got them all packed up on mules and horses. I was running the 4-wheeler all the way up in the mountain and back. It would be about a 2-hour ride by 4-wheeler, so it's about 3 to 4 hour horseback ride.
Damn.
So
Okay.
the outfitter, some of my coworkers at the time, they threw them on the mules and horses. They told me, hey, can you get, mostly because they're Wisconsin boys, can I get the beer up there? I told them that as a job I am willing to do. That Busch Light made it up there seamlessly.
Perfect.
But yeah, I made it up there. Throughout the week, boys were having kind of a hard time hunting. You know, I'd kind of drive up there. I was staying down at the ranch at the time. I was doing a lot of the ranch work, trying to feed the rest of the mules and horses if anybody else came in. Or we had a group of hunters that was actually staying at the lodge at the time, so I would help cook the meals. Once they were done, feed the horses. I'd probably drive up by the other camp, make sure everybody else was doing good. I was kind of like the middleman.
Gotcha. Okay.
But one night, I got a call, and the cook that was up there, she was the best guide they have ever had. She's been there for 30 years. They need her to be a guide because the other guy that was guiding, he's never guided elk either. So they
she
threw
was
me
the
up
camp
there.
chef
I started.
and a guide?
Oh, heck, man. Her name is Chrissy McGovern. She can do anything. I've seen this woman get ran over by a tie rail by a horse and a mule. She got right back up, brushed herself off, and asked if somebody could go grab her horse for her.
That's awesome.
That is actually the same week I watched her get ran over. Didn't faze her a bit.
That's too cool.
But
that's too cool.
Yeah, I went up there and I was the cook for the day. So I roasted some chicken for these guys. They had a propane stove up there. I don't know how they got it up there. I don't know if it was by 4-wheeler or what, but it was just a regular kitchen stove hooked up to a big propane bottle in the back.
Huh.
So I put in some chicken, roasted that for 7 hours. I did some sauteed vegetables. I just kind of threw everything that I could think of at these boys just to give them some kind of something to look forward to, because I can't really do any better than what the cook/guide could do.
Yeah.
That woman could cook. I just wanted to give them something good to eat when they came back, because a lot of the time they weren't seeing anything. They were feeling very down and out. So I thought this will boost their morale and give them something good to eat, give them some good stories, send their butts right back out there, get me an elk. Well, that night went good. You know, they all came in. They actually told me, the guy who was helping her cook, that my cooking was 10 times better than him. And if I leave right now, they're going to be pissed. So I told the outfitter, I think I need to stay for the rest of the week. But we went to bed that night. I was the last one to go to bed because the camp cooks usually are. You got to do the cleaning, got to make sure no animals get into your stuff. You turn off the generators. And when I sit down, I lean my hat back. I'm actually in the tool tent. So I got tools, I've got chainsaws, I've got shovels, anything you need up at camp, I'm in that little supply tent. They just put me a little cot in the corner and said, here you go, buddy.
Yeah.
Well, listening that night. I just finally started dozing off, and all I heard was crunch, crunch, crunch. And I thought that was a little big to be just anything. So I'm listening. I usually carry my Glock on me just for, growing up in Wisconsin, we got a lot of wolves and a lot of bear. It's just kind of habit now. I'm just kind of resting my hand over it. I'm thinking, all right, well, we'll see where this goes. If I hear the cook tent get broken, I know it's a black bear, so I'll have to jump up and go take care of it. All of a sudden, it feels like the tent got lifted and dropped. And I'm thinking, what in the royal hell? Like one of those
canvas wall tents, or is this like
yeah, it was a canvas wall tent. It was only like 6 by 9, or it was an 8 by 4. It was a smaller one.
Okay.
And this thing didn't have like a, usually you put a tarp or something underneath it to avoid water and stuff. Well, they didn't expect anybody to be sleeping in it, so I just got dirt on the bottom of me, and I just got this little cot in there. I heard this tent drop, and I thought, what in the royal hell is going on in here? And I'm listening, and I'm looking around, and the tarp, there is a piled tarp on the left side of me, the northwestern side of me. I'm looking at it, and this whole freaking tarp is moving.
Oh, Jesus.
And this is a big 12 by 20 tarp or whatever size it is. This thing is moving, and I'm thinking, this is not good. What the hell is that? I'm staring at this thing, and out pops this head. I'm looking at it, and it almost looked like a chinchilla.
What the hell?
I don't know if you know. Yeah. I'm like, what the
like
fuck
these little
is
furry
that?
things. Like chinchillas are like what they make like a lot of fur coats out of because they're like so soft and fluffy, right?
Yeah, they're all soft and fluffy. They're cute looking things. Well, this thing wasn't that cute. I was just kind of looking at it, and I'm like, what the hell are you? So I threw a rake at it because the rake was right by my head. Thing barely moved away from the rake, and it's still looking at me. I'm like, what the hell? It kind of looks like a possum meets a rat looking thing. I didn't know they had they're a certain kind of rat that grow or that live down here, because I've seen a couple of them in Utah.
Yeah. I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
What are those things called? I'll let you continue, but yeah.
I tell you what, if you come up with it and you remember what it is, you got to let me know, because now I'm running a blank, because all I can see is that fuzzy little face looking at me and the little whiskers looking at me. But as soon as he turns sideways to see how long this damn thing is, holy crap. It was definitely the size of a possum. It was big. And I am literally trying to beat the hell out of this thing with rakes, whatever I can get my hands on at the time. I got tools all the way around me, so I'm just grabbing and throwing. I don't know how the hunters or the guides who were right next to me couldn't hear this going on. And I finally beat this thing out of the tent. I'm starting to fall back asleep, and I'm just kind of pondering in my head, I can't believe I just got into a fight with a rat and almost lost. And all of a sudden, the tent picks back up again and drops.
Oh, he's coming for you.
And I look back over, and the damn thing came back for me again. And same thing. I fought him again. I threw stuff at him. At this point, I was even considering just shooting him in the head. It was a pack rat. That's what they are. They're pack rats.
Pack rat.
This big, that's what the outfitters call it, was a pack rat. And
I'm trying to remember what these things are called. But yeah, keep going.
If you remember like the ultimate term, you got to let me know, because that's what I've been calling them, as pack rats. We went through this every 30 minutes. I would fight him off. I'd start laying back down. He'd come right back in. It was constant for the nenext 4 hours. I went to bed at 11, and I had to get back up at 3 o'clock. When the outfitters, or not the outfitters, but the guides, my coworkers, when they got up, they stopped into the supply tent to grab something. Oh, it was for the horses and mules we were feeding alfalfa cubes. And they look at me, they shine the flashlight on me, and I'm sitting upright on my cot. My feet are on the ground. My head is in my hands. I don't remember this, but the guides still laugh about it to this day. They look at me and they're like, Buck, which was my nickname at the time, like, Buck, what's wrong? I guess I look at them with bloodshot eyes. And I said, I'm not the only one living in this tent. And they gave me crap for the whole entire week for this dang thing. But those guys came back the next week by themselves, no hunter, no nothing. And they said they swear to God that they heard something smashing and crashing in the woods. And they swear they heard that tent rise and fall. And when they went in there the next morning, that thing was tore up.
Yeah.
You know, all the tables were tipped over, buckets were tipped over, my cot was upside down.
No way.
I looked at them and I was like, that pack rat ain't no joke, buddy.
That's funny. So I think I looked it up. It's a marmot, if that rings a bell, which is also, they also go by the term, what does they go by? Whistle pigs. Whistle pigs and marmots are the same thing. And they're basically like, they look kind of like hamster, gerbil, squirrels, but they're about the size you're talking about. So I think that's what you probably ran into. And I've seen them. I've never seen one as close as you did. But yeah, I think you had a run-in with a high country yellow-bellied marmot, my friend.
Well, that yellow-bellied marmot made me kind of yellow-bellied because I was a little nervous about him looking at me like that. He probably thought I was a big piece of cheese or something because he was not scared of me at all.
Yeah. I wonder if there was anything in there that maybe he was interested in, that he'd been coming back and forth and like was just so used to going for it. Who knows?
I have no
crazy,
clue.
Man.
But I guess I should probably lead into some actual hunting stories then with you, shouldn't I?
Yeah. I mean, that was a good one. I appreciate that one. But yeah, let's keep going.
Well, growing up in northern Wisconsin, you kind of grow up with hillbillies, or what the Northerners call Yoopers. That is kind of what I grew up with. We listen to polka music, country music, or if we're not listening to that, we're listening to 80s rock. Always have a beer in your hands. Always looking for a good time. You know, we always love the Packers. That is just the kind of lifestyle I grew up in. Those boys just did not care about anything. Hard workers, but they love their beer at the end of the night. They love a good time. And I absolutely enjoyed it. But I grew up hunting with my father and my grandfather and my two uncles. One was married in. He married my aunt, my dad's sister, and my other uncle was my dad's brother. And because of those four men, they made me the hunter I am today. Because my dad, from when I was 6 years old, he packed me with him. Even though I was a cancer kid, I had leukemia, I had childhood, still took the time. Even though he couldn't do the hardcore hunting, you know, he made ground blinds or he made actual hunting stands to where I would be comfortable and I could still enjoy it with him.
That's awesome.
So having a man like that, the provider he was, because he made sure that we always had food on the table. We didn't really have a lot of money, but he taught me that you don't have to buy a steak to eat good. You can provide for yourself. He taught me how to be a woodsman. I owe everything to my father. If it wasn't for him, I would definitely wouldn't be the man I am now. And now my grandfather, also a real good man. That guy's a little goofy. Just a little goofy.
They all are.
Some of the stuff he put me through as a kid, and I'm sure he's still laughing about it. One of the stories that really sticks in my mind is it was during, I think it's in October. It's early October is when his birthday is. He took me, it was a Friday night. I just got home from school. I'm 9 years old. He called my parents and said, "Hey, I'm going hunting for my birthday. I want to take Curtis with me." They said, "Sure, fine." My dad didn't care. So he took me to his old deer stand. He usually parks in the field. It's a 400-acre field, or not 400-acre, but 400-yard field. He parks halfway through there. We start walking. We walk south. On the western side of us, which is on my right, we got a little trail that goes alongside of it. And this is all northern Wisconsin, swampy pine and hardwood woods. It's real thick. The only way you could really hunt deer up there, other than hunting trails really hardcore, is bait, because it's all private land.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
he has this way back in the swamp, about, well, not way back, about 100 yards away from the field. He walks me back there, opens up the shack. He already put corn out. He looks at me. He's like, "You go in first." I kind of look at him. I was like, "Why?" He's like, "I need you to tell me if there's a porcupine in there." I was like, "Wait, what? What do you mean?" He's like, "I need to know if there's a porcupine in there. If there's a porcupine in there, let me know and I'll shoot him." I was like, "Well, why don't you go first?" "Because I got a bow. I got to wind up first." Like, man, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm 9 years old, so I'm not gonna test my grandfather. So I walk in there and I'm kind of looking around the corners. There is porcupine poop all over this thing, by the way. And there's nothing in there. And I told him that. He's like, "Okay, we'll get in there. We got to get going." He sits me down on the right side of him. And he's sitting on the left. He can see the bait pile. I really can't. But I'm just happy to be out there with him. So he sits back, throws in a big dip of grizzly, relaxes, and we just start sitting there. And you're listening to the squirrels. Every once in a while, you'll hear something jump on the top of the shack. It's just an old wooden shack. I mean, the wood on it, or the plywood, is grayed out from how long it's been there.
Okay.
But we sit there for an hour, and he looks down at me. He kind of kicks me in the shin. I'm kind of dozing off because, I didn't have an iPod. I didn't have anything that I could play with. I'm just kind of twiddling my thumbs looking around. He kicks me in the shin. He's like, "Hey, there's 2 deer coming." I was like, "Okay, you going to shoot them?" Kind of kicks me again, and he's like, "Shh, be quiet." I'm kind of sitting there, and I'm watching him, and this goofy guy, I can see he's starting to shake a little bit. He looks at me, and he whispers real slightly, "I see an 8-pointer and a doe." I'm like, "Okay." I'm getting all excited. I'm all hunched up as a kid, and I'm waiting for this. I can see his left hand with the bow in it. It's starting to shake a little bit. You can actually hear the clicking of the arrow in his little metal arrow rest going back and forth. I'm thinking, okay, here it goes. And he starts to draw back. And he's still clicking. He's still shaking. I'm getting excited. I'm waiting. He looks at me, winks, and shoots. And all you heard, and I mean, this old bow, I don't even know what it was. I think it was an old PSC, the ones from the 80s almost. It just makes this huge thud, and you hear a whop and kind of bellowing a little. And outside of the blind, the bait was only like 25 yards. You can hear the flopping. And I'm like, man, he just dropped a deer with a bow. I'm kind of looking at him all bug-eyed like, man, did he actually do that? He's sitting there. He's still puffing and puffing. He's still shaking. He's all excited. I look out I asked him, "Can I look out the window?" He said, "Sure, go ahead." He's still huffing and puffing. I just put my hands up against the windowsill, and I just kind of peek my nose around. And he shot the doe, but he shot the doe in the back of the head, and it came out the nose. I know it's a little gory.
God.
And I'm looking at him, I'm like, "What did you do?" He looked at me, he's like, "I didn't think it was going to work, but I had to try it." I was like, "Why didn't you shoot the buck?" He said he wasn't coming in, so I wasn't going to wait. He said that he's never missed a deer. Yeah, meat, but I was like, "Well, why didn't you shoot the big one?" He said he's never missed a deer on his birthday, and he wasn't starting today. He wanted to leave with a deer today. Okay, well, I'll help you. This man walks out there. I mean, it's just probably a 2-year-old deer, maybe a yearling, not very big. He grabs it by the arrow and drags it out to the truck. And me as a 9-year-old, I'm looking at this. This is just, I don't know if I should be afraid of him. I don't know if I should be excited for him. But he drags this thing out. We go to the feed store because that's where we had to register the deer before they started doing the phone call or your call-ins or anything like that. And the guy walks out. just a short little guy. He actually has to step on his tippy toes to look down into his truck to look at this thing. And all he hears is this little guy scream, "What in the fuck is wrong with you?" And I'm just looking at my grandfather. I was like, to me, he's a hero. I mean, I couldn't do that at that age. I still can't to this day.
That's a ballsy shot.
But yeah, he pulled that
off. I don't know if
off.
I'd ever take it, but that's that's funny.
I don't know why he thought that was okay. But man, that was one of the memories I'll always have of that old man, is that little bit of a wink and that thud of the bow. And man, just looking at that shish kebab that he's got outside, and I'm like, what in the heck did I get myself into?
So funny. I also love that, like, he's shaking, right? So he's got the jitters. Like, it's hitting him, but he's still like, okay, I got my grandson here. I got to look cool. And he gives you the wink, even though you can tell, you know, in his hands, like he's about to lose it, but he's got to just keep his cool so that you can have this memory the rest of your life. That's pretty cool.
Oh man, can't forget. Yeah, that is a story that we always bring up. Of course, he changes it a little bit. You know, he wasn't shaking. He was stone cold. He was a stone cold killer that day. And it's like, man, no, I saw you almost lose yourself. You almost peed your pants. You were so excited. But I got one more porcupine story for you, and then
yeah, I can't wait.
I probably should
also,
tell.
It's hilarious that he sent his 9-year-old grandson in to look for the porcupine. He obviously knows it's a porcupine spot, right? So like, this is just a super quick story, but it's about a buddy of mine, and we were hunting, and so we're hunting in South Texas. We're actually hunting a riverbed, and we're walking around. And we have shotguns, and on the way in, we notice a porcupine. It's dead. It's been eaten by who knows what, and it's pretty gnarly. But either way, we come back on our way back to leave the riverbed. There's another porcupine chewing on that porcupine, and that's not the part here that's funny. What's funny is my buddy, a grown man, right, like 33 or something at this point. He goes, "Oh, stop! It's a porcupine." I'm like, "Yeah." So he's like, "They can shoot their quills at you, man." And I'm like, "I think you've seen too many cartoons, man." I was like, "They don't actually shoot them. Like, what kind of shows are you watching? Like, you don't touch it, obviously. That'll mess you up, but they're not going to shoot at you from like across the river." So it's just, you reminded me of that. And I'll say my dumb buddy. I love him, but he's a dumb buddy, and we all have one of those. So, all right, I'll let you go to your porcupine story. That's all I wanted to share, was my buddy thinking that porcupines can literally shoot you from across the river.
Oh man, if you don't have that dumb buddy, then your life isn't entertaining at all.
Yeah,
you always got to have
I've actually
that one
filled
guy
my life with
camp.
a bunch of dumb buddies. So I've got a whole bunch of entertaining friends.
That's all that is.
Yeah.
There you go. But so, go ahead.
Oh, nothing. Just taking a drink of water. You go ahead, man.
Okay. So as a kid, I once I got my driver's license, man, the whole world was opened up to me. I used to deer hunt all the time. Bow hunting was my thing. I saved up all my lawn mowing money, and I bought myself a PSC Stinger off of Cabela's. And that PSC I frickin' took everywhere. I actually took a doe out of my grandfather's apple orchard with it. He definitely, I got a butt chewing for that one. You don't touch grandpa's pets. But
he's like, only if you shoot in the back of the head.
I didn't pull that one off yet. But so I after school, every day after school, I was going out. We lived about a mile and a half from both my grandfather's house and my great-grandfather's house, which was his father-in-law. They allowed us to go out there and hunt on their 120 acres, you know, once we helped them with firewood. Yeah, it was our trade-off. So every day after school, I'd get home, throw my camo on, and go. Also, when you have a sister that's younger than you, you don't want to be in the house.
Yeah.
So hunting was I'm getting out of here. I made it. I left at 3:30. It only took me 10 minutes to change into my camo. I always left it in a tote full of cedar boughs because I always gave it a sweet smell. I didn't know anything about scent killer. I'm 16. I can't afford that stuff.
Yeah.
I grabbed my old trusty PSC. Here we go. I usually park into we had hay fields there. I usually park on the side of the hay field, right where the truck is kind of covered up by some brush. And then I would walk a half a mile uphill into a maple, kind of a maple hardwood woods, a little bit of pine trees. But I was on this hill. On the bottom of it turns into a cedar swamp. On the upper echelon of it turns into, maple trees. It's really wide open, but if you stay on that woods line, always had deer running through there. So I always put a little bit of bait down there because, 120 acres, most of the time the deer was off the property anyways. It just kind of pulled them in for me. I had a double buddy tree stand, about 16 foot, up in this big tamarack, the one tamarack tree in the whole entire woods. I'm in it. My father always told me, look up in the tree before you get up there. So I usually do. I always look up. I didn't see anything. So I climb the ladder stand, pull up my bow, and I begin to sit. So I'm sitting there for about 2 hours. It gets dark at about 6. So now I'm starting to get into that, that twilight, that prime time hunting time. And I know I've got 2 big bucks. I'm all excited. And I'm watching this little barn owl swoop in and chase the red squirrels out of my bait. It was just kind of a little bit of entertainment. I thought it was cool because I usually don't see owls. So having this, I thought, man, this is a treat for me today. He's chasing this squirrel back and forth. He'd sit on a perch. Once that squirrel came into the bait, he'd swoop down, try to grab it. Squirrel was too fast for him, go hide in a dead tree. Once the coast was clear, he'd come back. Well, this went on for about 30 minutes. All of a sudden, that owl looks straight at me. And I'm wondering, he didn't see me. I'm not moving. But I can hear above me scratching, and needles are falling down on me. And I thought, that squirrel is right above me and is going to get an owl to fly right in my face. I guarantee it. Just watch this. That owl is watching me, kind of tilts his head a little bit. These needles are starting to fall on me more. I can hear the bark scratching. All of a sudden, I feel a thud hit me on the shoulder. I look at my right shoulder, and there's this pebble sitting there. And this thing looked like almost like a quarter-sized pebble. I thought, man, that's a little big to be a squirrel. And I'm hearing this scratching, and it's getting closer to me. I got more brown pine needles falling on me. And now I'm getting kind of nervous. I'm like, what? I didn't see a bear cub up there. I didn't see anything like that. So I look up, and it's about 5 feet away from me, there's this branch that goes straight out. And when I look up there, all I see is these orange teeth and this big fuzzy looking thing. And I'm like, what the hell is that? I don't know if you've ever heard of porcupine, but they kind of make like a pig squeal almost. If you're not paying attention, it'll scare the living heck out of you.
Oh, I'm sure.
So when you're looking at this thing and all of a sudden it gives off one of those little squeals, instantly I'm like, what the hell? I'm like contemplating life right now, wondering what the hell I'm going to do, until I really realize, holy shit, it's a porcupine. I could literally stick my hand up and tickle its belly. It's right there. And I'm thinking, it is prime time hunting. That porcupine is comfortable on that big limb above me. I can withstand a couple of pebbles of poop on me for a big deer. I am that dedicated right now. So I just thought, okay, we're going to have a mutual agreement. You stay there, I stay here. We'll be fine. So I sit back down. I got another 30 minutes of daylight. If something's going to come in, now's the time. I'll gut it out, and I'll just have a good story for later. I sit back down. 10 minutes goes by, and I hear the scratching again. I look up, and all I see is the ass end of this frickin' porcupine. He is now on the tree, and he's coming straight down at me.
Oh, God.
And now I'm wondering what the hell. Luckily, I had the clip for my bow. Otherwise, I was just going to toss the bow. I put my bow on the clip, threw the arrows. I threw the bow down. I grabbed the seat of the buddy stand, and that was probably the most athletic move I've ever made in my life. I just jumped, swung my body, hit the steps, and I just slid all the way down. I just put my feet on the side of the steps. I put my hands on the side on the rails. I just slid my body down. I'm looking up there, and that stupid porcupine is on my seat looking down at me. And it's kind of making like a jittery chuckling sound. To me, he's laughing at me now.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm telling you, I'm going to come back for you someday. You just ruined my hunt, buddy. And a lot of people will ask me, well, why didn't you shoot him while you're sitting in the stand? Or why didn't you shoot him when you got on the ground? One, I got a bow. I don't know. I guess I don't trust my shot that much. Or he's 5 feet above me while I'm sitting up there. Do you really want to take the chance to have a porcupine hat?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Chance.
Like, you drop that thing, then and that's more than a hat. That's a permanent hat. That thing's sticking in you.
And those are piercings that you just can't come back from.
Yeah. You ever seen like a photo of a dog that attacked a porcupine? Like, you'd look a lot like that.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be having a date for prom after that. I think that'd be pretty ugly.
Yeah.
So I made a split-second decision to let the porcupine win. I just jumped down. That was it. But
understandable, man. That's pretty crazy.
But I probably should talk about some actual animals that we've killed, because now it's just making it sound like whenever I go out in the woods, I'm too busy fighting porcupines and not getting any deer.
Right? You got more porcupine run-ins than anything else. So,
well, most of my deer that I've killed has been with a rifle. I've done a lot of bow hunting. Bow hunting was my absolute dream. I loved it so much. There was nothing more I loved than taking my bow out. But man, I had so many heartaches with that sucker. I had to learn the hard way. When you're in a tree stand, you gotta figure out the actual angles of where the lungs and heart are. You can't just aim normal. And unfortunately, I've missed 2 big bucks doing that. One was too high and it hit the air pocket above the lungs. The other one was too low and I just kind of grazed underneath the heart. Both of them were on camera the week after. There's just no other sick feelings.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest ones I've remembered is youth season. I was 13 years old. My father took me out. Saturday and Sunday is youth hunt. It's in October. It allows kids to get out with a gun before actual rifle season, so that way their chances of getting a nice deer was better. My father and I went to my other grandfather's 40. So altogether, my grandfather had 500 acres. My uncle had 300. They had this random 240s over by a river. It was about 10 miles away from our house. My father asked him if we were okay if we go hunted it. Because normally nobody goes on there. They said, yeah, sure, go try it. The only thing that they do is they do some trapping on the creeks. So, me being 13, I just wanted to shoot something. So I was all excited.
What do they trap for, if you don't mind me asking? Like beavers, or what do they?
Actually, they do beaver, muskrat, weasels, fox if they can, and bobcat if they had a tag.
Gotcha.
You got a tag or drew a tag up in Wisconsin, you could go trap a bobcat. So what we did, we got up early that morning. My father drove me down there. What it is, you can see you're going south. On the left side of you, you've got the Flambeau River, it's called. On the right side, it is nothing but hardwoods and farmland. You're always having hayfields. Hayfields are abundant up there. And then you'll have little barns, most people have beef cattle, but mostly it's the dairy state. So you got dairy cows everywhere. We've passed a couple farms, and all you see is these rolling hills, and they're nothing but hay fields, split by a creek, a bunch of hardwood trees and pine trees, so it's really thick. And then on the other side, you can see more fields. And my father pulled into the first set of fields next to the road, parked alongside of these trees where the creek is, and there's a culvert with a little road that goes over top of it leading to the next field. And he told me, get your gun out, put a bullet in there, make sure it's on safe. You're going to walk in front of me, all the hunter safety stuff that you're supposed to go through. He made sure that was built in me. Don't point the gun at anybody. It's dark out. You ain't going to shoot anything, so don't get your finger anywhere near that trigger. And we're going to walk. We walked 400 yards, maybe 500, with me being young, and that was a lot on my legs anyway, so I was kind of tired when we got there.
Okay.
He picked this one tree in the middle of the whole freaking field alongside of a fence line. One tree.
Yeah.
He pushes me up against it. We're in between two fields. We've got the road and the river to our back, and we're just watching the wood line. And once the sun came up, the left side of us, that whole field had about 20 or 30 deer in it. On the right side of us, there's like 3 or 4, the very far corner. Well, I don't know what happened. I don't know if the wind changed, what could have gone wrong, but they all smelt us and took off.
Oh,
I was a little upset.
I bet.
He told me, he patted me on the head and said, we'll be fine. I'll take you home. We'll have some lunch. We'll come back. I said, okay. We came back that night. We saw some more deer, but I wasn't able to get a shot. Well, he had to go to work next day. So guess who? Good old reliable grandfather said that he'll take me to the same spot. So he picked me up an hour earlier than my dad did. So maybe with us coming in a little earlier, the deer would be able to settle more. Maybe they won't spook as easy.
Yeah.
And this morning I remember as crisp as any. We get out. He didn't lecture me like my father did on, bullets, making sure your bullet's in the chamber, but yet on safety. He didn't really care. She just said, throw the gun on your shoulder. Let's go. All right. Well, walking with him, I still remember the cool breeze, how crunchy and sparkly the hay or the leaned over grass looked. I still remember kind of that pinkish glow on the eastern side behind the river looked. You could still see all the stars. You could kind of hear the mill that my dad worked at. It was about 6 miles or so away. You could actually hear some of the mill noises because of how silent this was, how still it was.
Cool.
Every
cool.
step you took, you swear you could hear the echo. And, we did the same 400, 500 yards my father did. Picked the same damn single tree in the middle of the whole fields. He puts me in front of him, gets a fence post right next to me, so that way if I had to, I could brace myself up against the fence post. He sits behind me. I hear the chew can open up again. He puts a big thing of grizzly, 5 o'clock in the morning in. Here we start sitting. Now, as a kid, I'm looking up at the stars and thinking, man, I'd love to shoot a buck today. I'd love to make my dad proud of me.
Yeah.
And, I'm listening to him. He's an old guy, so I'm listening to his heavy breathing. Every once in a while, he has to give off a cough. So you're staring at him side-eyed like, man, you're going to scare everything out. But you can't say anything.
Yeah.
I'm listening. I'm watching both fields. I'm looking at the stars. I think this is just one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. That pink sky is rising more with the sun at my back. And off the left-hand side of me, coming over a hill on the field, you could see two figures. And I looked at my grandfather, and he said a doe and a fawn. Okay. So I kind of just sit there and I relax again, and we're just watching these two deer ever so slowly with the sunrise. It's like the more the sun rose, the closer they walk towards us. This goes on for about an hour. I mean, they're just very slow, methodical. They'll eat a little bit, pick their head up, move a little bit closer, put their head back down, start eating.
Yeah.
But with the sun rising, every time they pick their head up, I swear I can see horns. I even whispered to Grandpa, I was like, do you see that? He's like, no, you're crazy. You're just getting buck fever. Well, gee, thanks. But the closer they got, the more I swear they have horns on them. And they got to the point where the little one was 20 yards away from me in the middle of this field on the fence line. He's eating, doesn't even know we're there. I don't know how this little tree is concealing us, but right now we're doing good. And 40 yards from me, 20 yards behind this deer, this little rack buck is also lined up facing to my right, and he's broadside, so is the spike. My grandfather whispers into my ear, shoot the spike, it's closer.
Yeah.
I looked back at him, I was like, no, I'm leaving with the big one. And he kind of flaps me in the shoulder a little bit and just says, shoot the spike. Well, I'm not shooting the spike. I got a rack buck in front of me. This is my very first deer ever. I am leaving with that deer.
Yeah.
So I picked the gun up. It's a little 243 Remington. And I'm staring at this deer. The way my grandfather tells the story, it took forever. It was probably 10 minutes, he says. I don't think it was that long. But all I did, I made that gun go circular. I saw that deer through the scope. The gun, I'm just slowly making those circles with the scope, smaller and smaller. Before I knew it, once I saw that right behind the elbow of the deer, I squeezed the trigger. And man, that thing just dropped. I turn around, my grandfather's holding on to his heart, and he looked at me. He's like, man, I thought you were never going to shoot. I was like, well, what'd you expect? He just laughed at me. He's like, I thought you were going to wimp out. I was like, wow, I love you too. But that was my very first deer ever. Dropped him right in his tracks. It was a nice little 5-point buck. That's just a memory that I've always carried with me, watching my dad's pride as he came home from work to see that thing hanging up.
Yeah,
made it all worth it.
That's awesome. That's a great story. I really like your grandpa. After hearing your stories, he's a character, man. And that's a phenomenal. Was that, you said that was your first buck, or just your first buck ever?
First deer ever.
That's awesome.
It was my very first deer, and I got to spend it with him. And honestly, I would never trade it for the world. I thought it would have been fun to do it with my dad, but he got to see my first bow kill, and he got to see me kind of dance around like a fawn because I was all excited. But no, doing that with my grandfather, I definitely don't regret it.
Awesome, man. That's a great story.
I got two more for you that are entertaining.
Keep them coming.
And I think,
yeah.
All right. So as a guide, guiding out in Colburn, I made it out here in May. And like most young guys, I'm in a new state. I'm going to get Tinder, and I'm going to have some fun. Well, truth be told, I didn't have some fun. I met the absolute love of my life. I met my wife.
Hey,
we started texting each other, started calling each other. We met up in Grand Junction. She made me eat Rocky Mountain oysters our first date, by the way. She wanted to see how tough I was.
There you go.
But, we spent the day together. She made me eat Rocky Mountain oysters, and after lunch, I told her, okay, I thought it was the end. I told her, I'm going to go shopping now. She's like, what are you going shopping for? Well, being the honest, true guy I am, I looked at her and was like, well, I need soap and underwear. I'm out.
Yeah, no, the
So
vital,
I'm going to
important
Walmart.
things.
Yeah, I was completely just, I'm blunt about it. She looked at me, she smiled, and said, well, let's go then. I thought, what? Seriously?
She
She
wanted to
spent
go
the
with
whole
you. She
day
wanted to
with
pick
me.
out
We're
something
out.
a little lacy for you, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Something good looking on me. Yeah. She spent the whole day with me. I mean, I guess it just was comfort, but
Yeah.
so I've been with her for the last 2 years. We're going to be married a year on October 4th. I
Awesome, man.
proposed to her last
Congratulations.
year. Thank you. I proposed to her last on August 13th, which is my birthday. So we're going to have our wedding reception this coming weekend. But I tell you what, my wife is a badass.
Yeah.
And when we first got together, I always told her, I'm taking you hunting up north. You need to meet my family, because she's never been north of Colorado.
Okay.
So
Where's she
talk
from
about
originally?
culture shock. She's from a little town called Moab, Utah. You ever hear of it?
Oh yeah, no, I used to actually go to Moab on my birthday every year because it's not not a far drive from like the Denver area, so we'd just drive out there and we'd camp and drink too much beer and have some fun. So yeah, I'm very familiar with Moab. Love it. For the listeners, if you guys haven't been there, beautiful Arches National Park, amazing place.
Yep, that's actually where I live now.
Oh really?
I moved here after guiding, so I am actually looking at the LaSalle Mountains right now.
Oh,
That's
that's
kind of
beautiful
like
area.
why we're in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, she's my absolute good luck charm when it comes to hunting. Like I said, my wife is a true badass. We milk cows. We hand milk a cow early in the morning, late at night. We want to be homesteaders, and I couldn't do it without her. But when I took her hunting for the first time up north, she got to meet the family. She got to meet the characters, my father, my grandpa. She got to see the stock that I come from. But one of the
And she's
stories
still
that
with you.
really sticks with me. Oh, she's still with me. She puts up with me for sure.
That's awesome.
She's a very patient woman. I'll say that. Very patient. But I took her. We drove the whole way from Moab to Butternut, Wisconsin, which is 24 hours without stopping. Took us 32 with all the stops because we took our dogs with us too. We stayed at my grandmother's house on my mom's side. We only slept for maybe 2 hours. We showed up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I took her around the small town that I grew up. Took her to lunch. Noon rolls around and I look at her. I was like, honey, you want to go hunting with me? She bought a tag too. She bought an out-of-state tag. I had a tag. She's like, yeah, let's go. That's the whole reason why we came. So opening day, on 3 hours of sleep, we go sit. And that first morning, I saw 9 deer, and that is like unheard of up there.
Yeah.
So I'm already excited. I'm thinking, man, this is going to be good. We saw 9 does and fawns. I'm like, man, what are we going to see tomorrow? And that same stand that my grandfather and I had that memory of him shooting the deer in the back of the head, my father went and put a blind up in that same area. And he asked my wife and I, do you want to go hunting there tomorrow? You're more than welcome to. I told him with the memories there, oh, hell yeah, I'll take you up on that offer. And
Yeah.
she didn't know any better. She's like, yeah, I'll go with you. So we get up the next morning. We didn't go hunting that morning. We kind of crashed after that 36 or whatever, 32-hour drive. And we've been up for God knows how long now. We crashed. We slept in, got up. At about 11 o'clock in the morning, we got ready and we drove out to the woods. And I'm going to sit from noon till dark, which is about 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock. We start, the same walk, park the same place my grandfather always parked.
Yeah,
And we walk
perfect.
up to the woods. There's a woods road there. We climb onto the woods road, walk another, 30 yards, not miles. I mean, 30 miles would be long, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Put some corn out. She gets into the blind. We're sitting on a double lawn chair. She's on the right side because she's going to be shooting. I'm on the left side. I get in there. I got this bog pod tripod hunting sticks. I'm going to get this set up for her because she's using my big 7mm deer hunting rifle. So I want to give her every chance she can to shoot, to make the best shot. You know, I'm very big on being ethical.
Yeah.
So I'm getting this tripod settled. I got the front leg and the right leg done. I'm working on the left. All of a sudden, I get slapped in the shoulder. And I look at her, and I'm kind of giving her the side eye, like, what the hell did you just do? And she looks at me, and she whispers real slightly, I think I see a buck. And I look at my watch. It's noon. Nothing should be moving right now. So, kind of like how my grandfather did to me when I was younger, kind of passed her off. I was like, just let me do this quick. So I'm working on I just got to get this leg. I just got to lock it in, and we're done. She slaps me again and says, I think I see a buck. Well, now I'm a little annoyed. You just slapped me twice. So I just reached down and I clicked it in quick, and I leaned back and I'm kind of looking at her. And she's kind of looking at me with a side eye too. And she said, I can't see the head, but I can see the body. And she knows the body because she just spent the whole last week I was showing her whitetail pictures. I'm like, This is what a big buck looks like. You're not going to see this very often because they're pretty elusive, but you never know. Well, she looks at me. She's like, it looks like the pictures. And I'm kind of looking at her weird again. I'm like, I think you're lying to me. And I'm kind of doing the same thing my grandfather did to me. I think you got buck fever. And she keeps telling me, she's like, I can't tell if it's a true buck. We don't have doe tags. We don't want to be unethical. We don't want to be against the law because I want to keep my hunting license. But she's not taking a shot. Well, all of a sudden, she looks at me and says, it's a buck. But now he's out of her shooting lane. So she slaps me in the shoulder again. We're back to the slapping thing. And she says, pull up your gun. You need to shoot him because he's not coming back. So I have my .338 Win Mag. I have my elk gun. When I was guiding, I was planning on being a grizzly guide. So I got this big rifle thinking that, I'm going to shoot grizzlies with this someday. I brought it just in case if she wounded something, I could do a follow-up shot. It's not going to suffer.
Yeah, no, that's reasonable.
Well, I'm looking at her side-eyed, and I'm like, how big is it? She's like, it's a 4-point. In my head, when you say 4-point in whitetail terms, I'm thinking of a little forky looking thing. So now I'm really pissed. I'm like, you're wasting my time over a 4-point. So I pick up the gun just to appease her. Well, announced to me, she was talking in mule deer terms. So when I'm looking through the scope and I'm looking through the swamp, all I see is a rack go through the trees. My jaw drops. My heart starts beating. I probably looked just like my grandfather at the time. I'm starting to shake a little bit. Like, I'm excited now.
Yeah.
So I put the crosshairs on his neck, and I'm waiting. And as soon as I saw behind the front shoulder, I squeezed that big gun off. That gun, the compression of that gun was so intense. It moved the blind, turned the buddy heater off. Ears are ringing, but the deer drops.
I'm sure.
I'm all excited.
I'm sure
Yeah, I was excited, but man, my head was ringing. I did not expect to shoot that thing in that close of quarters. But I'm shaking. I'm all excited. I'm looking at her, and she's kind of excited too. She's, grabbing me by the arm and said, "You got him. You got him." And all of a sudden, her face switches. It's almost like you just took her favorite toy away or something as a kid. She looks at me with a glare and says, "You got him. That was supposed to be my buck." And I'm looking at her, and I'm like, I did what you told me. You told me to shoot. I shot. You can't get mad at me. And just the face alone, went from true excitement to almost disgust.
Yeah.
But she still stayed with me. But that was one of the biggest bucks I have ever shot. And it was all because of just some weird luck that we came in early and this thing just was walking through the swamp.
Yeah.
But luckily, though, with all that hunting, dealing with all of my relatives, she did get to shoot her first whitetail.
Oh,
and
great.
She did that in 30 below zero. And to see her resilience really showed how much I loved her. And luckily, because of that, we stayed together, and that's why I proposed to her. And
That's
that kind
an
of
awesome story, man.
It leads into the last one I have for you.
Perfect.
And then if you
Let's
ever
go.
want to hear more, maybe we'll hook up some other time.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. Maybe sometime for a beer, maybe sometime for a hunt. But yeah, let's hear this next one.
Yeah, and just so you know, before we do this, if you ever come out to Moab, I will 100% buy you a beer. And I also know some good off-roading people. We could take you off-roading.
There we go. Yeah, I'm sure Moab will be in my future at some point. I guarantee that. My wife and I have been talking about getting back out there, so I'm going to take you up on that, Curtis. So I'm not going to let you. We actually have it recorded, so you can't go back now. So now you have to buy me a beer.
All right, I won't take it back.
Perfect. But let's go to the last story here. What do you got?
All right. So last year, my wife got lucky, and she drew out a mule deer buck rifle tag and also a cow elk tag. So we prepped all summer long getting ready for this. Unfortunately, she kind of busted a rib. So our hiking became literally nothing. We went hiking one day for her elk, and it hurt so bad that we couldn't elk hunt for the rest of the week. So she never got her elk. But her mule deer tag came up right after that. So now I kind of understand, all right, she's hurting, but she's still putting on a brave face. She still wants to do this. I'm going to do whatever I can to see if I can get her in front of a mule deer. So we spent the first weekend, we were just kind of, cruising some of the 2 tracks around here with my truck. We were just doing some truck scouting, looking through the binoculars. We saw quite a few deer. I never imagined to see the amount of mule deer that I was going to see. I mean, it was almost like waves. You drive around one corner, there's 9 of them. Drive around the next corner, there's maybe 8 or 10 of them.
Yeah.
And I'm all excited for this. I'm thinking, man, I've never seen this many deer during a rifle season ever, because I'm still thinking whitetail terms. So this is great. This is good for me. That night, first opening day, we got a chance at a 2-point mule deer. Had a really nice body on him. His rack was decent for a 2-year-old. She said, "We want meat. I'm going to take him." Okay. We got out of the truck. We did a little bit of a stalk. She took a shot. That was a miss. And normally she does not miss. At least on targets, and with that deer she shot in Wisconsin, she's usually dead on.
Yeah.
I'm kind of looking at her. I'm a little bewildered. This guy's long gone now. Him and the little pack of does he had with him. My rifle has a dial in the back to zoom, and a dial in the front, almost kind of like a yardage. And it was cranked all the way up to 200 yards. And this deer was only 40 yards. So that frickin' bullet went somewhere to New Mexico, probably. She was shooting so high.
All right.
So Sunday, saw a bunch of does, didn't see any bucks again. Monday, we had a giant snowstorm here last year. So we had like 3 foot of snow in one night. So hunting kind of went pretty slow because you can't drive those 2 tracks anymore. It's really slippery. It's slick. You could get hurt. You could get stuck. No one's going to come and save you.
Those 2 tracks go crazy out there with that red dirt.
It's kind of amazing, isn't it? It's kind of just turns into sludge immediately.
Yeah, it's
There's
pretty.
just no way
It doesn't
around
even
it.
look that bad. I've driven it, similar country, antelope hunting, and all of a sudden you're just like, oh god, we need to get out of here as quick as we can because if we go any farther, we're stuck.
Oh, 100%. It's odd. Man, I slip on it like it's ice. Like, I'm from Wisconsin. I know how to dance on ice and get away with it. But man, with this sludge, as soon as it rains, I look like a newborn fawn. My legs start shaking, and I don't know how to keep my balance.
Yeah,
So I look all different kinds of goofy. But we finally get to the next weekend, so it's the last weekend of deer season. That Saturday, we spent that whole week hunting. We did a little bit of hiking, as much as we could with her rib. We saw some deer, but we didn't see anything that was worth taking.
yeah,
But Saturday, it was just like a switch. It started warming up throughout the week, and by Saturday, opening morning again. So we could drive as far as we could. So we kind of went into the same area where we saw that 2-point, and I thought, what? There's a good chance we might see something again. Well, we're driving, and the great old public land out here. We got one Jeep in front of us and an ATV in the back of us. That's early morning Saturday. That Jeep goes to the left, we go to the right. That ATV kind of stops, and I thought he was going to go in the center. So we're a couple hundred yards away from each other. If somebody shoots, nobody gets hurt. I'm okay with that. We drive down this little 2-track, down a little gully, come back up, and I see deer off to the right. I pull out the binoculars. This one's a 2-point, but this one's an older buck. You can definitely see the bases are huge.
yeah.
It's kind of a chocolate set of horns, but he's got white tips. So he's a beautiful looking deer. And I told her, I was like, hey, that might be one we need to take. So she jumps out. She starts doing the stock. I just stay in the pickup. So I don't, she gets about 50 to 100 yards away from me. I can kind of keep an eye on her. But I trust her shooting ability. This woman's already proved to me that she's a heck of a shot. And she ain't going to take anything that's not worth taking. So she sits there for about 10, 15 minutes. She's looking around. She looks through the scope. But this deer must have known something was wrong. He booked it to the next county. He was gone. So she kind of had her down face. She grabs the gun, grabs her shooting sticks. She starts walking back to the truck. I'm looking off to the right where that deer may have ran off to, and then I look off to the left, and there's this 3x3 just staring at me. He's 50 yards away from the truck. I'm looking at him, he's looking at me, and I'm like, well, if I had a gun, you'd be mine. But I'm in a truck, and I don't really want to shoot out of a truck. I don't have a tag. I'm not going to do any of that. But I'm kind of looking at her through the windshield, and I'm trying to point, like, hey, it's over there. Look. She gets to the side of the truck, finally get her attention, and I'm like, look over here. She looks. She doesn't see him, but she trusts me, so she comes around the front of the truck. She gets where my eyes are looking, and she walks a little ways that way, about 20 yards away from the truck. I see her get her gun on the shooting sticks. I'm getting all excited. I'm thinking, here we go. We're going to have a deer this morning. She doesn't shoot. She still doesn't shoot. This deer's looking at her. That's deer. I mean, this deer's been standing there for a little while now. You would think this guy would have been long gone. She still doesn't shoot. And then, time passes. Deer ain't going to stand there that long. Puts his head down, and he just walks off out of our lives. She looks at me. She said, I couldn't see him in the scope until he moved. And I'm just rubbing my head, and I'm a little impatient. I'm like, okay, well, get in the truck. We'll get around him. We'll get out. We'll do a stalk. We'll get on him. She said, okay. She grabs her stick. She grabs a gun. Come over. She got in the truck, and we start trying to get around this deer so we could do a nice stalk. That ATV guy, unbeknownst to me, came behind the truck and is now alongside of us. I opened up the window. I thought he was just going to kind of whisper, just kind of, hey, how you doing? This guy's from Alabama, and he starts talking out loud. Hey, how you guys doing? You guys seeing any deer today? And I'm trying to be polite,
Yeah.
but I'm also a little ticked. And I said, no, I haven't seen anything. Maybe if he was a little more polite, I would have said, there's deer around here, but now I'm a little upset. I just said, no, I'm not seeing anything. Okay, we're going to go up here a little ways. So he cuts right in front of my truck and he goes where we were going. And he's got his wife in with him. He drives about 50, maybe to 100 yards away from me. I could still see him clear as day. He looks to the left, touches her on the shoulder, stops his ATV. They get out and they shoot.
Oh,
so I'm guessing that 3x3 is now taken. But I'm pissed. I'm freaking pissed. I look at her and I'm like, I'm getting out of here before I say or do something that is probably not good. She said she's okay with that. She's a little upset. I'm a little upset. But, we got tonight. We got the next day. We can probably get this done. We'll be fine. We came back that night, same area, drove up the 2-track, went through private land into public. The road splits out again to the right, to the left. I think I'm going to go to the left, uphill. I'm going to glass downhill. I had a white Jeep in front of me again. This lady pulls off to the left, right in front of me, stops, gets out of her Jeep, walks about 20 yards, gets down on her knee, bang, shoots a buck right in front of us. I look at my wife and I'm like, this either could be really good or really bad. And she's like, well, just keep going. Maybe we'll be okay. Okay. We drove up the 2-track. We're passing deer. So, they didn't get scared off by the shot. We saw a little Forky walk away from us, and she said it wasn't worth shooting at. She wants to take something that's worth it, and I totally respect that.
Yeah.
We drove up to a T. In this little meadow in front of me, I'm kind of glassing these deer. My wife is kind of, taking a drink. She's kind of relaxing a little bit. Her ribs hurting. I told her, you know what? Let's take a right. Let's go down towards where we saw those people this morning. Maybe we'll see some deer in those meadows again. We've seen them in the past. Maybe there'll be something down there. We can do something about it. We drove no more than 20 yards, and all you see is this big body sitting on the right side. And I mean big. And the coloration versus everything we've seen throughout the week is different.
Yeah.
And when he sticks his head up, it is a beautiful textbook. And I'm excited now. I'm freaking out more than she is. I'm like, hey, get out of the truck. Go about 20 yards away from the truck. I don't usually like, vehicle hunting, but with what we've had to do with her injury, I had to make it happen. But I told her, do not take your shooting sticks. He's so close you could just point and shoot. Well, she looks at me with a stink eye. She thinks I told her, grab your shooting sticks. So she's pissed at me. I'm pissed at her because she's grabbing her shooting sticks, and I told her no. She gets out, and as soon as that kind of metallic-y sound, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, most hunters do, once that kind of metal touches his rock, that ting sound. It made that sound. He picks his head up, looks at her, and he starts to walk away really slow. And I am at this point now, I'm pissed. I'm thinking she completely just pulled her. I'm bewildered. So the truck's still running. Her door is open. I open my door. I walk around and I said, we're going after it. She looked at me. She's like, well, aren't we going to spook him, or aren't we going to spook other deer around here? I was like, I don't care. Grab your gun. He's not that far. Let's go. He's downhill. He doesn't have our thermal, so he ain't going to know we're behind him. If we go slow, maybe we can catch up to him. We follow that deer for 300 yards or so. And I watch him go over the ridge in front of me, and he's out of our lives. So I am already, I'm mad. I'm a little disgusted. I don't know. I'm not mad at her. I'm just mad at the situation. I'm kind of mad at myself because I should have been able to help her more. So I'm a little pissed. I'm looking at her and I'm trying to keep a brave face, and all of a sudden you hear little bleats. And I've never heard a mule deer make noises before. So I'm looking at her and I'm like, what the hell is that noise? And I hear more bleats. Here to find out, that deer ran us into a small herd of does and fawns. And all of a sudden I heard this golden noise. It was two bucks fighting right underneath us. We're on a small, isn't it? Small decline. We're looking down into them. It's not much of a decrease in elevation, but it's just a little bit to where they're underneath us. So the wind's in our face. And I'm watching down there. I told her to let's walk up a little ways. We walked up. We got right behind a cedar tree. I can see the does and stuff coming out of the cedars. It's at that twilight. We're at the last 15 minutes of daylight. And man, a little 3x2 comes out. I look at her. I was like, shoot him. Well, in my line of sight, it's perfect. I mean, I could just point the gun and shoot. Well, she could only see the back half of him. I didn't know that. And she's literally on my left side. But she looked at me. She's like, okay. And she shot. Well, scope got me again. Her shot went up. And you could see it touch the branches. So she missed that deer. And they jump a little bit, but they didn't run. All of a sudden, in front of us, jumps out the other buck that was fighting with him. And boy, was it bigger. It had a bigger body than the buck that we chased. The horns are a little bit smaller, but not by much.
Yeah.
And I look at her, and I said, shoot him. Well, she told me those golden words that made my stomach just sick. I can't see him in the scope. And I probably wasn't very nice, but I looked at her, I was like, do you need an invitation for this? Shoot him. I looked at the scope. I adjusted it down to 50 yards. He was way closer than that. Helped her rack in another bullet. She looked down at him. And she squeezed it off, and he did the hunch. And I'm excited. I'm like, okay, put another bullet in him. She looks at me stone cold and says, I think I shot him in the ass. I'm looking at her bewildered. I was like, well, in that case, shoot his ass again. Go again. Helped her rack in another bullet. She takes a breath. She's looking at him. And boom, shoots again. Well, now she's out of bullets, so she's grabbing some out of her pocket. And me, I was so excited at this point. This deer starts going in circles. His back end doesn't move, but his front is doing circles. And I'm yelling, go down, buddy. Go down, buddy. Go down. And he dropped. She gets another bullet in there, and I was like, okay, let's just walk up slow. If he moves, maybe we'll put another bullet in him, but I think you got him. Let's not ruin any meat. This whole 50 or so yard walk, she looks at me again and says, I really think I shot him in the ass. And I'm kind of like, I don't think you did. He was sideways. He was perfectly broadside. You can't get no more textbook than that. So we get up to him, and I see air bubbles coming out of the front of the deer. I look at her, and I was like, well, yeah, underneath the neck where the brisket would be, right above it.
Okay.
There's air bubbles coming out of there. I look at her, I was like, maybe you did shoot him in the ass. Okay. You shot him in the ass. I don't know what to do with this at the point. So she goes and gets the truck, which is about 400, 500 yards away. By the way, it's still running. Doors are still open. So somebody could have stolen my truck. Somebody could have stolen anything out of there. Because of my absolute angry moment, we left that truck. We're going after a deer. So she goes and grabs the truck. I start opening up the deer I'm field dressing it for, you know, with this being my wife's first mule deer and first actual buck, this is a privilege for me. So I was field dressing it. I opened it up, and the heart is obliterated, but the stomach contents are still together. So you don't get that instant smell. To me, it's like watery sandpaper, and you don't feel that. And I'm pondering life here, and I'm like, what? How did she get that hole in her chest, but there's no guts? Like there would be some kind of way that this would be, this would be a little more shredded. As I took the deer back, I caped it out so that way we could get it to cool. And she put 2 bullets right on top of each other, right behind the elbow. She blew ribs in front of the deer.
Oh, wow.
Did you catch that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you got that. Yeah, she blew the ribs out the front of the deer. Her 2 shots were so close together that they had the same exit wound.
No
and
way.
Instantly right there, I was like, I will never challenge her shooting skills, and I will never make that woman mad.
That's awesome. That's a great story. I was confused too there for a minute, but I'm glad it worked out the way that it did, Curtis. That's awesome. I think at this point, we should have had you for your own porcupine episode, and we probably should have had your wife on for all the deer hunting stories.
Yeah, I saved a lot of the actual killing stories because they weren't as entertaining as these ones. So I thought maybe for anybody who was driving around for an hour, wanted to listen to something funny, I figured I'd give them some good deer camp stories.
Yeah, man, these are great. And you know what's funny is after doing plenty of these podcasts, it's often, and I've said this plenty of times before, but it's more often the stories that like you don't necessarily get the deer and something else weird happens that are the really memorable ones. So this fits in perfectly, man, Curtis. Mm-hmm. This was a lot of fun, man. I know you said you don't have any more. Did anything else pop into your brain as other stories you want to tell, or are we going to wrap it up here? And it's fine if we do.
Oh crap, man! I got a lot of hunting stories. It just depends on what time we have. And I could always come back again.
Let's have you come back again. Let's call it for now. Let's tell the people where they can find you. Let's start with that.
Sure. So I'm in Moab, Utah. I run my own 4-H here. I also work at the hospital here. I'm on Facebook, just Curtis Walker. You'll see my Facebook page show up. So if you ever want to see something, or if you ever want to come out, I'm always up for a beer.
Perfect. And you owe me one. Do you have Instagram or anything like that, or just the Facebook?
I just got the Facebook. I'm a pretty plain Jane kind of guy. I'd rather be out hunting than playing on.
Totally understandable.
Playing on anything on the
totally
computer.
Understandable. I've had a couple guests that are like, "Yeah, no, I don't have any social medias," and there's nothing wrong with that. So, Curtis, man, this was a lot of fun. I really do appreciate you reaching out in the first place, and then coming on and telling us some great stories. In fact, I think you were the first porcupine stories. So, like, not only did you have one, you had 2, and you were the first 2. So this was fun. And I hope someday I do get out to Moab to meet you and hopefully shoot some rifles with your wife, because she sounds like a sharpshooter. So thanks again, man.
Oh, she is a sharpshooter. Absolutely, buddy. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. And yeah, I would take the shooting skills from my wife 100%. I'm just the muscle of the group.
Perfect. All right, man. Thanks again. All right, guys, that's it. Another couple stories in the books. I want to thank Curtis, of course, for coming on the podcast. Couldn't have done it without him. And then, of course, for reaching out. Thank you, Curtis, for doing that. To you listeners, if you think you have a good story and you want to tell it, even if you don't think it can fill up a whole episode, reach out to me. I'm thinking about putting together some compilation things, as well as I bet you're a better storyteller than you think, and I bet we'll have no problem putting together a full episode. So reach out to me and be brave like my man Curtis Walker. Beyond that, please do go follow us, subscribe, and give us some reviews. Ideally 5-star, but if we're not giving you a 5-star podcast, then don't. And that's it, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. I appreciate every one of you. Now go out there and, make some stories of your own. Thank you.